really pleased that Michelle Grech is joining us to give the last formal presentation of the workshop. Michelle is the head of section Human Factors for AMSA, and as you've seen, the theme that we've been developing today is about people in both yourselves, others, and really this ties a lot of this together. Michelle joined the AMSA in 2012 as head of section in Human Factors. She's responsible for leading the integration of human factors best practice, identifying and managing key human factors research and development areas, and providing high-level advice on projects aimed at managing maritime system safety risks. Michelle was instrumental in the development of the IMO Human-Centered Design and Software Quality Assurance Guidelines for Enhanced Navigation. She's currently leading research and development efforts to support a fatigue risk management systems approach in shipping. Michelle completed a PhD from the University of Queensland in 2005, specialising in fatigue, workload and situation awareness in the maritime domain. She also completed a Master of Science in Marine Technology from the University of Newcastle and a Bachelor of Mechanical Engineering from the University of Malta. She currently holds an Adjunct Associate Professor position at the University of Queensland. Michelle is a chartered engineer with more than 20 years' experience working in the maritime domain as project engineer, marine surveyor and maritime human factors researcher. Prior to joining AMSA, Michelle worked for the DSTO, the Defence Science and Technology Organisation in Australia, managing and providing expertise on human systems integration and human factors research. Michelle is a frequent guest lecturer on maritime human factors and has published extensively in this area, including in books and book chapters. You'll put your hands together and welcome Michelle to the stage.
Thanks, Adam. I realize I'm the only person standing between now and lunch, so not to deny you your second meal of the day, I'll try and be as swift as I can. Okay, so just as a start, so as Adam mentioned, AMSA has a maritime human factors area, so I had that area. And the way we work very closely with the industry, but we also work with the research institutes. So basically the idea is to have the research support to actually support some of the policies and development that will support maritime safety. We also work with the IMO, the International Maritime Organization. Now I mainly work in the international shipping area, but we also support, when requested, the domestic area as well. And the idea is that the way we can influence shipping internationally is through the International Maritime Organization. So we've had a lot of initiatives or the turnaround where we've actually have done that, and we're continuing doing that influence through the IMO. Probably most of you have seen this. We're safe because we've never had an accident. And we know that there's a constant struggle between staying in business and staying in business safely from an operational perspective. And obviously somewhere between the bankruptcy and the catastrophic area lies what we refer to as the safety space. And to some extent we want most of our operators to operate in that safety space. So and preferably within the mid part of the safety space. But we know that every day seafarers have to choose whether they have to cut corners or not in order to meet operational demands. And this happens every day. And to some extent, for most parts, these shortcuts, nothing happens, everything goes on as usual. But sometimes kind of bad things happen. And most of the cases nothing happens, it becomes part of habitual practice, it becomes what we refer to as normalized. And this is to some extent why we do need safety management systems, like was mentioned. It's not just a good thing that they become normalized. It's because there's a culture that things are, you can continue working and cutting corners. But eventually things happen where we have incidents. And in most cases what we do is we try and fix that, but still we tend to continue drifting into failure, and then the bigger accidents happen. So that's why interventions are important, obviously, to improve safety. such as safety management systems, fatigue risk management systems, and that's something that I will talk about today. And it's actually, from a fatigue perspective, it's good that Gary has already provided some of the background in terms of some of the issues in relation to also the aspects of fatigue. And one aspect that we hear a lot in accidents is the word human error. We hear that a lot, don't we? The word, 80% of accidents are caused by human error. And it's kind of the maritime domain's assertion that the majority of accidents are due to human error. It's very similar to other industries, so it's not different. However, and possibly one would think, I have issues, big issues with the use of the word human error, and most of the, obviously, human factors community do, to some extent. I mean, one good thing about the word human error is actually it provided one of the biggest spare, to some extent, in the development of the human factors area in safety-related industries, such as the maritime, aviation, and some other industries. So it kind of made it quantifiable to some extent. But the downside of this is that when something goes wrong, complexity is reduced to this, this small pernicious word, and we tend to use this word human error, kind of blaming the operator or the person at the sharp end of the system. And what we see is there's always a seafarer at fault. It's like, I get up in the morning, I think, you know what I'll do today? I might crash a ship, or I might just injure myself and injure my mates. And most people go to work to do a good job, and we know that. You go to work to do a good job. Same with seafarers. So using this term is absolutely not a helpful term to be using in this industry. And to some extent, it doesn't deny responsibility. So it doesn't mean that people are not responsible for their actions. Of course they are. But errors, and we know that errors are a result of the conditions, to some extent, under which people are worked. So the conditions and also their capabilities and limitations. So it's the whole context. So it's not just about that person who made that error at the end. So by labeling these issues or the person who was involved as reckless or labeling as human errors is not helpful to us. It's not telling us anything. So to some extent, and often the conclusion of the word human error actually is the conclusion that the intervention should have been directed towards the human error operator. And as I mentioned, this is wrong. So basically what we do is, well, we need more training, we need better education, we need to improve the selection of personnel, or we even punish or discipline the person. And what we know now is that human error, they do not occur in isolation. Okay? So they are intermixed with other problems. So it is fruitless and misguided to actually blame the operator or categorize the bishop as human error. So we need to look beyond that. So, and there's two schools of thought in this regard. So the aspect where in most cases we view human error as a cause, no. This is the 80% of accidents are caused by human error. It's not the cause. The school of thought is that it's a consequence. So potentially there are conditions that have led the operator to actually make a mistake so it's actually more complex than that. And there are systematic connections between how people actually fail or people make failures. So where does this leave us to some extent? So in order to understand and improve safety, we need to focus on systems concepts, in preference to focus on failures directed at the sharp end, which is the operator. So it's a bit more complex than just focusing on the human error, but that means we learn more, and that means we learn more where safety improvements can be targeted and safety improvements can be made. And to some extent we do this by evaluating and studying how people work within their work environment, or else we actually put them in a lab and try and evaluate how they work under certain conditions. So we can understand better how people respond in certain situations and when placed under certain conditions. So as people, we do have our limitations and we do have our capabilities. We go beyond those, and there's problems.
Just one, sorry.
Yes.
What about complacency?
Yeah, this is the same like talking about human error. Same thing. So there is a reason why complacency happens. For example, if you put a person monitoring something for more than 2 hours, we know that in terms of human capability, we're very bad monitors of situations, extremely bad monitors. So if you're going to put me to monitor something for 4 hours, I'm going to do a terrible job of it because I'm not designed to monitor things for 4 hours. I need some kind of stimuli. So I need something, either job rotation, or I need something that makes me active within the process. So in human factors term, we don't like using the word complacency because there's no word like complacency. People daydream, yes, of course, but it's not complacency. It's very different.
No, but there is complacency in the workplace. You've got to be honest, there is complacency in the workplace.
Yeah, well, I mentioned this before, that people are responsible for their actions, yes, but we really need to look at why complacency happens. We need to understand. If there is complacency in the workplace, let's understand why. It's not a question about complacency. If you tell me that person is complacent, it doesn't tell me anything, to be honest. Maybe it tells me, oh, maybe you need to give them more training, or maybe you need to punish them for being complacent. But maybe there's a reason. Maybe that person is stressed, or they're thinking about home, or they're actually doing a job which doesn't actually match their capabilities. So there's always it's a consequence. It's not a cause; it's a consequence. So there's something that's conditioning that word complacency or that complacency. And like I mentioned, so there are many aspects. And the way I'm going to talk about this, I'm going to talk about it as I'm talking about the seafarer, because that's the area I work in to some extent. But it can apply to any industry or any domain to some extent. So there are various conditions that can affect seafarers or how they perform their work, and these conditions are aspects such as ergonomics. We spoke about shifts, watch scheduling at sea. So there's aspects that can really affect how people actually behave or their health or they perform because of their particular watch schedules. And the task demands, the workload, different types of workload, high workload, low workload, type of demands, they can affect how you actually operate or how fast you become tired, for example. Ship motion, seasickness. That's, it's a lot of people suffer from seasickness. There's been quite a few studies in that area. And they found that, once you're seasick, you can't do anything, basically. You can't work. But we expect seafarers to continue working even when they're seasick. And some of these can lead to accidents, obviously, the more problematic ones. So from a human factors, what we want to understand is we want to understand these factors and how they interact with the maritime system. So then we can have more proactive measures to actually minimize some of these issues at sea. So to some extent, when we talk about human error or human factors, we're trying to understand how people perform and behave in various operational or maritime contexts. And that's what we're trying to, what we try to establish. Now I'm just going to talk a little bit about fatigue and fatigue management in maritime. And like I mentioned, this kind of preempts some of the aspects that Gary spoke about previously, which are really important and they come into play from this perspective. This is actually a survey that was done quite a while ago. It was actually commissioned by AMSA in 1997. It was referred to as the Survey of Health, Stress and Fatigue of Australian Seafarers. It incorporated a sample size from different industries as well, so it wasn't just the international shipping, but there was also an element of seafarers from domestic shipping as well who participated in this survey. And what they tried to establish, what they wanted to develop a profile of the Australian maritime industry, including its physical health and health behaviors, and determine the levels of occupational stress in the seafaring population, and highlight some of the potential job industry sectors and issues requiring further investigation. And obviously the results were pretty bad from a seafaring perspective compared to shipboard people. So obviously they found that seafarers smoked, drank, ate more sugar and fat and exercised less than the Australian population. And that's still valid to this day. The majority reported poor sleep quality, still valid to this day. 50% reported less than 6 hours of daily sleep at sea, and this happens till today, and 80% report occasional to frequent stress on the job. So it's kind of interesting that this was a 1997 study, now we're in 2006, and conditions haven't changed, and we still have the situation on board ships. There were some moves to actually try and implement some interventions, but at the time, nothing really happened because there were some other implementation aspects that were happening at the same time. So unfortunately, but some of the stuff which is in this report went into an original guidelines which was developed by the International Maritime Organization, which is currently being updated. So if we look at some of the unique aspects for seafaring as compared to other industries, one of the differences that from an international shipping perspective, I'm not sure about the domestic side, we have seafarers who spend between 6 to 9 months or even longer at sea. So these people never go home for potentially 9 or more months. The MLC doesn't allow you to go beyond 12 months, but men want a long time to be working constantly in a particular schedule for such a long time. There's obviously no clear separation between work and recreation. So on a ship you have to do everything. You have to do your recreation parts, whatever, leisure activities, watching TV, and also there's the work part. And it's composed of different nationalities now, different people from different backgrounds. You don't get to choose your friends. So basically you have to work with who's ever there. And the operational aspects become more complex because of reasons such as the variety of ship types, the pattern or the voyage pattern. So if you're doing a number of port calls, that means it's going to increase your workload rather than if you're doing just blue water traveling. And obviously all these aspects present a unique combination of potential additional contributors to fatigue. And there's no backup. You're out to sea, absolutely no backup. You get seasick, you don't have to work. So that's the situation. Just to set the scene, Gary has already mentioned some of these, which is really good. From a fatigue perspective, from a biological perspective, there's two main aspects that actually influence how tired you are. One of them is the time awake, and we tend to refer to it as also the sleep homeostasis. So the longer you are awake, the more tired you get to feel. And this is not just about working time. This is about how long you've been awake from the time you've actually stepped out of bed. And there's been studies that shown this comparable assessment with blood alcohol level. So 18 hours is comparable to a BAC of 0.05, which is kind of the legal limit in Australia. That doesn't mean that because if you've been awake for 18 hours, you've drowned or intoxicated. It's just a comparative assessment. And we know that extended hours at sea are not uncommon. So it's very common for people to actually work beyond those hours. And obviously, the longer you are awake, there's that homeostatic pressure for sleep. You want to actually you feel more tired. And then there's the circadian rhythm, which is time of day. And Gary spoke about this aspect. As humans, we generally want to obviously sleep at night, and we want to be awake and alert during the day. And that's driven by the biological clock. And light obviously is one of what we refer to as one of the strongest Zeitgeber drive, which actually makes us alert and sends us to sleep. So to some extent you can actually control people's circadian rhythm using light, to some extent, unless there's no other exposure. So for example, on submarines, you can actually entrain their circadian rhythm because they have no exposure to artificial lighting, but not on ships. Because if you're working on the bridge, you're exposed to different lighting conditions. So that means you never adjust, and that's why you never adjust to ship work, because there's the light aspect which actually comes into play. Then there's time of task. What we refer to time of task is the workload, so the type of workload that you're doing that also can affect how quickly or tired you get. So obviously, high workload can actually accelerate the onset of fatigue. And there's also the aspect of low workload. So what we talk about is these monitoring tasks. So if you're doing, and that's very taxing on certain cognitive functions as well. So if you're doing monitoring tasks over a period of 4 hours or more, you tend to get tired and complacent, as we call it, but we don't like to say the word complacent. And obviously there are individual differences between people. So Kevin Rudd says he only needs 4 hours of sleep. I don't know whether you should believe that or not, but there you go. Most people need between 7 and 9 hours. Obviously, some of the enemies need a little bit more or need a bit less. But in general, people fall between that 7 to 9 hours of sleep. And it's not true that you get less sleep as you get older, and Gary spoke about this. Yes, you might get more interrupted sleep as you get older, and possibly related to health aspects, but it doesn't mean you need less sleep. That means you're going to be more tired, because you're not going to get the sleep you need. And from a sleep perspective, it makes a difference, not only how much you get of sleep, also the quality of sleep. So Gary mentioned this aspect of the stages of sleep, where we need both the slow wave sleep, which is the non-REM, non-rapid eye movement, and the REM sleep, which is the sleep where we dream. So our sleep goes through stages during the night, and it cycles through those stages. And that's why the 7 to 9 hours continuous sleep in a block is so important, because if you actually split that up, or if you take a chunk of that away, that means you haven't got enough of the REM, what we refer to as the REM or non-REM sleep, which is particular phases or stages of sleep. And you need all of those to have actually restorative, good quality sleep. Because during sleep, as Gary mentioned, that's what's happening. Your body is actually physically and mentally repairing and restoring. It's an active process. So it's not just sleep where nothing happens. And that's why sleep is best obtained in a single block. And in most cases, what happens at sea is people don't get their sleep in a single block. They get it all split up. And that's a problem. Long term, Gary mentioned this issue. When you have cumulative, what we refer to as cumulative sleep debt, it's not just going to affect your performance, it's also going to affect your health. And sleep science makes it very clear that sleep is not a tradable commodity. You don't sleep for a very long time, you potentially could die. So it's that bad. This is some, Gary mentioned the health aspects in relation to sleep restriction, but there's also the performance aspect from a safety perspective. And this is some studies which were done by Van Donken. And basically what they did is they restricted sleep over periods of, over a 14-day period. So they had a sleep-deprived subjects. So over a period of 3 days, these sleep-deprived subjects couldn't perform anymore. So, so you could see the curve. So this is what we refer to as performance vigilance task, and basically it measures reaction time. So the higher it is, the worse you are, as you can see in the graph. So the higher the value, the worse your performance. So for example, for participants who actually slept for 4 hours, their performance was equivalent to people who are sleep deprived after a period of 14 days. Similarly with people who slept for 6 hours. There was a sleep deprivation, there was a performance decrement over a period of 14 days, and even people who got 8 hours time in bed showed a performance decrement over a period of 14 days. So we can imagine if this goes on for a very long time, your performance is just going to get lower and lower and lower. And the only way you can reset or get your performance back together again is to have the block of sleep. And you don't, and to some extent, sleep is not recovered hour by hour. So you say, oh yeah, I've only been deprived for 3 hours, so maybe the next day I'll just kind of sleep a 3 hour extra. So it's shown that, for example, after doing 3 or 4 nights shift work, you need at least 2 nights of sleep. And 2 nights is 2 whole nights. So that means it has to fall within what we refer to as the window of circadian rhythm, the 2 to 6 a.m. block, which is where we tend to have the lowest alertness level, when we feel more sleepy and when we want to go to sleep. And that's really important. So from a safety perspective, this is a huge issue. And one other insidious aspect of fatigue is this is another study that was done. So the first one is what we've seen before. So they measured objective measures of performance for So they sleep deprive them, and then 4 hours sleep, 6 hours sleep, and 8 hours sleep. So the performance got worse with less sleep deprivation. But the other one is a subjective measure. So the same participants actually gave a subjective measure of their sleepiness. And you can see for the highly sleep deprived subject, it was very similar to the objective measure. For the people who got 8 hours time in bed, it was kind of similar to the objective measure. But the people who get 4 hours or 6 hours, they actually evaluated, or their response was that they felt okay. And this is one of the problems with fatigue. So people who are fatigued are very, very bad judges of their performance, and it's one of the insidious aspects of fatigue. And that's why it cannot just be managed by the person themselves, but it has to be managed from an operational perspective. So there has to be some kind of way how to manage this from above, because a person is very bad at actually judging their own performance levels when they're highly fatigued, which is a really big issue. It's one of the actually insidious aspects of fatigue. And Gary mentioned about some of the consequences. From a performance perspective, there's slowed reaction times, reduced vigilance, complacency, again, memory lapses, inattention to tasks, lack of awareness, communication, and judgment, error of judgment. We like to use that a lot. So that could come from the aspect of fatigue as well. So it's not the error of judgment, the aspect that fatigue was an issue here. Decline in motivation, microsleeps, one of the most dangerous aspects of fatigue, which is microsleeps. People just involuntarily fall asleep for a couple of seconds. Sometimes they don't even realize that they've done it. This happens in driving along, a lot, long distance driving. And then obviously there's the long-term health issues that Gary mentioned. And it's costly, because fatigue, it's not just a safety issue, it's also a welfare issue. It's costly for the industry or the operation, it's costly for the government. We've got long-term health aspects coming into play here. Just kind of as an example, I'm not sure, probably most of you are familiar with the Shenang 1. So this actually was a bulk carrier which grounded in Douglas Shoal in the Great Barrier Reef, and it happened in 2010. I was actually talking to the duty officer yesterday, who was the first person on the scene. So the duty officer was actually called in 2 hours after the incident happened. So the incident happened at 5:05 p.m. and the duty officer came on duty, which is Ange, at 7 p.m. And she said, luckily McKinley was there, which is our CEO. He was actually the person who was coordinating the whole operation when this happened. So it was a quite big issue. There was pollution in the Great Barrier Reef. So it was a lot of effects and discussions, media attention. So it kind of brought a lot of aspects in relation to this. So, and in fact, the final action in this event was the chief mate. He actually missed the course alteration, and subsequently the ship ran aground. So he had to make a course alteration at a certain point, and for some reason he missed that. He was a highly trained, well-experienced seafarer. So the question was asked, so how could he have missed that waypoint? Was it complacency? And another thing is that the chief mate, it was the first time he was in charge of the operation in Western Harbor. So he felt compelled to actually be involved as much as he could in the loading and unloading of the vessel. In this case, it was unloading the ship, loading the vessel, and also the ballasting the vessel. So he actually remained on duty throughout the whole operation, and nobody bat an eyelid. And you can see these are his work hours. So, pardon?
How long was the operation?
So 3 days prior to the accident, he actually spent an extra 3 hours doing the calculations, loading and unloading. So he actually was working in excess of 16 hours per day, 3 days previously. The day of the incident, on the second day, the day before, on 2nd April, he was up at 3 a.m. because he was weighing anchor, and the pilot came on board, took the ship in, so until 1 a.m. So he actually was awake for 23 hours, and this is during the window of circadian law, which is the time when people feel they want to sleep. He slept only for 2 hours, from 1 a.m., was woken up at 3 a.m., so he probably was also suffering from sleep inertia when they woke him up, and this is the feeling of grogginess you get when someone wakes you up in the middle of the night to do something. From 3 a.m., up to 12:20, which is just before lunchtime, he managed to get some sleep up for 30 minutes. He slept for 30 minutes until 3:30, and the alarm woke him up to go on duties, because he was scheduled to go on duty at 4 a.m. So this guy was involved in actually the loading of the vessel, plus the fact that he still had to do his duty time. So he still had to get up for his duty, which was at 4 p.m. So he actually took or relieved the second mate at around 1600 hours on the bridge. The chief mate, the second mate who actually gave him the watch handover took a fix on using the GPS on the chart and handed over the watch to the chief mate. And the grounding happened at 17:05. So for some reason he missed that waypoint. In the previous 38 and a half hours, he had only 2 hours of sleep. Just 2 hours of sleep. So that was quite interesting. It was good weather, the visibility was good, there was absolutely no traffic in the vicinity. It was marked on the paper chart where there was a change in the actual course as well of the vessel, and also the waypoint. And he must have forgotten that there was this change. Of course, you tend to forget when you've only slept for 2.5 hours. We've seen the consequences of fatigue. Chief engineer came up at 16:30, so half an hour before the grounding, and he was actually going to take a fix at 16:30. Chief engineer came up, asked him what's the speed, and he went, 12 knots. Checked the speed, chief engineer stayed there for 12 minutes, left the bridge, he completely forgot to take the fix, as you do, when you haven't slept for a very long time. He decided to take the fix at 1700 hours, and he did. It was a bit too late because he realized that he was off the chart. He was off the first chart already. Changed charts, went to the next chart, and he realized he was a bit too close. It was too late. The vessel grounded. So this was investigated by the ATSB. They found, obviously, they from a maritime perspective, I'm not sure what it's the same for domestic vessels. They are required to retain hours of work and rest records. To some extent, from a shipping perspective, crew members are actually left to their own devices to manage their fatigue. Even though there's the hours of work and rest records, we know that to some extent, operators, they feel compelled, to do the right thing towards the master. So they actually put the hours of work and rest records that the master wants to see, and the master puts the hours of work and rest records that the operator wants to see, making sure that they actually meet all the regulatory requirements. So our regulations don't really work from this perspective. And even if they did, it didn't really matter, because hours of work and rest are not going to do anything, because they don't account for the circadian rhythm to some extent. So this was one of the issues as well. ATSB indicated that they should have a safety management system, a fatigue risk management system within their safety management system, but obviously it's not mandatory from an international shipping perspective. So we don't know whether anything has happened or not. And in fact, lack of fatigue management system and guidance was found to be one of the main issues in this regard. And this is not something new. This happens a lot in shipping. These are 3 other accidents. One of them was the Fingal. In this case, the Fingal, it was 2-watch system, 6 on, 6 off. And this is quite common, where we see a lot of incidents happening with the 2-watch system. And the 2-watch, you just think about the 2-watch system. So you've got two blocks of 6 hours and 6 hours where you need to sleep. So basically, it's already 6 hours. It's not enough. So that means you're going to have to try and restrict your sleep within those 6 hours. Now people say, oh yeah, well, then you can sleep in the other 6 hours. Yeah, but if those 6 hours fall during the day, we know that during the day it's very hard to sleep because your body is telling you, wake up, don't go to sleep. So that means that that person possibly wouldn't be able to sleep during the 6 hours. So potentially what you see is that these people only manage to sleep a couple of hours per day, potentially 4 or 5 hours from research that's been done. So these people actually sleep 4 to 5 hours per day, and they're actually doing this watch cycle for months on end. Of course they're going to fall asleep at the wheel. I mean, no rocket science there. And it's happened a lot. In most cases, nothing happens because you're out at sea and there's nothing out at sea, but then sometimes something happens if you fall asleep. There's a rock just in front of you, and you just head straight for that one. And that's when the ship hits the fan, and that's when you end up in prison. Sorry. So that's the situation at the moment. So,
can I just ask a question?
yeah.
Where they use the term hours of rest as opposed to hours of sleep, I think there's a lot of confusion there as well. People say, yes, well, I was resting, but I wasn't actually asleep. That throws confusion.
That's a very important aspect as well, because in fact, from a regulatory perspective, we also talk about hours of rest. So we say, so we are making an assumption that because we've given you that the minimum hours of rest are 10 hours, what are they? Okay, 10 hours, and you can split those up. That means that you're going to sleep, but seafarers, they want to do other things. They're on board the ship all the time. They want to have a shower, they want to get dressed, they want to eat, they want to send letters to their family, they want to do other things. So what can they do in those 10 hours? It's kind of a pretty ridiculous situation. And we talk about endurance. We try and it's like we try and treat them like robots. We give them 10 hours for 9 months, and God knows physically and mentally what's coming out at the other end. We have a lot of men overboards. We don't investigate those. We don't really know what's going on. But we certainly have an inkling that, something terrible is happening out there with people jumping off ships. So it's a big issue.
Isn't your problem? Man, you're going to move on the rest of your regulator. But you're regulating the wrong end. The guy goes like sleep, and he doesn't sleep. It's your manning levels.
The manning force part of it, yeah. It's a holistic. Yeah. Yeah, certainly. That's a good point. In fact, that's. Yeah. Yeah. I'll talk about this. The manning is really important. So, and to some extent, one of the issues is this is a MIPE study that was carried out in 2004. And obviously they found that most accidents happened during the window of circadian low. And most of them had fatigue as a contributing factor, so between 2 and 6 a.m. So they had a big number of accidents happening during that time. Similarly, there was another project which was referred to, it was a European project, it's referred to as the Horizon project, and what they did is they actually got seafarers in a simulated environment. So this was actually conducted in the lab. The first time we had this kind of study conducted in the simulator, and they actually did a comparative assessment between 6 on, 6 off, and the 4 on, 8 off watch schedule. So this is the 6 on, 6 off 2 watch cycle, and the 4 on, 8 off 3 watch cycle. So they wanted to evaluate how they performed in these different watch schedules. And they collected data in a controlled environment using the simulators for 7 days. So they actually were in a simulated environment. And they collected a combination of objective and subjective measure. So they even had EEG, actigraphy, which is what we refer to as the acti-watches. So they actually have 2 degrees of movement, and you can actually, it gives you an indication on when people are doing nothing, basically kind of sleeping and being active. So it gives you that indication. And also the diaries, which can confirm what's in the actigraphy. And then subjective measures, such as what we refer to as the Karolinska sleepiness scale. So it's a sleepiness scale to measure, they can give you an indication of what their sleepiness levels is across the days. And what they found is that 20% fell asleep at one point during the 6 on, 6 off watch schedule, and this was in a simulated environment. So it was in a simulator, so obviously nothing would have happened if they fell asleep. But it was interesting to actually get those results out and confirm that this is an issue, where previously we didn't really have this evidence, but now it's there, it's quite clear. But what's interesting was, as well, is they interviewed some of the shipping companies, and they did not think that fatigue is a problem, which is quite interesting to see that. They probably hadn't seen the results yet. And they would address it if they found it necessary, and would install equipment if insurance premiums were lowered. Of course they would. So it kind of gives an indication of where the priorities are. This was actually one of the worst cases in the study, where this person started. They were doing 6 on 6 off. They started their 6 on what scheduled at 1,800 hours, and this person literally was micro-sleeping for a period of almost 2 to 3 hours. From the time he took the watch to 23 hours was just, and it was visibly, just trying to keep himself awake, doing all kinds of things. So that was quite interesting to see. So it's also on video. So the evidence is clear. Seafarers are not immune to fatigue, like a lot of people think they are. They are affected, like any other individual, with the time of the effect, the circadian effect, the hours of wakefulness. It also affects them. Time on task, sleep quality and quantity affects them as any other individual. And also non-work factors, such as sleep disorders, and Gary mentioned this as well. We have no idea what the aspect or the issue, how big the issue of sleep disorders is on board the ship. We think it's big, because we know there's health issues and many other issues on board the ship, but we haven't really looked at that. So that would be interesting to actually try and identify this issue further. So from an international perspective, and this is what we're doing to some extent. So this is from the international shipping side of things. Because we can't influence shipping directly from an international shipping perspective, because you can only influence your own ships, Australian registered. So what comes into Australia, unless if they meet all the international, the IMO requirements, then it's fine. You can't do anything. If they meet the standards laid out by the International Maritime Organization, then it's fine. The only way we can influence shipping, foreign flagships that come into Australia, is to go through the International Maritime Organization and say, this is what we think. This is an issue, and we need to do something about that. And we've done this, and we've said, this is an issue, and this is a global issue, and we need to do something about this. So at the moment, what's happening is we're developing a fatigue risk management system for shipping, a framework. And at the top, and you mentioned the aspect of manning, at the top is the operational support or the organizational support, because without the organizational support, it's not going to work. It has to come from the organization. And one of the aspects that the organization needs to look at is what we refer to as adequate resources. We actually we refer to it as adequate resources for a reason. Because it's not just about the number of people you have on board the vessel, but ensuring that you have adequate resources to actually operate your vessel safely. Now we're saying that if you're actually in port, for example, instead of using your own crew to actually load and unload the vessel, you can send your crew to rest and possibly bring a shore-based crew to do that work. So that's what you're saying. That means you give them the 24 hours to actually rest, while the shore-based crew take care of the loading and unloading. And that's not to do with manning, because manning is what you have on board the ship. So we're saying that somehow the operator needs to be a bit more creative in terms of how they actually manage their resources in order to operate the ship safely. Not just from A to B, but also during the operation component. Because what we found also is, for example, ships go into harbor and they leave harbor with crew more tired than when they come in, because they're actually doing all the loading, unloading, and all the operational aspect. And obviously there are some challenges that we need to overcome. And one of them is the regulators, because this is not just one regulator we're talking about. This is other regulators in other countries. Although in Australia we do have many regulators in different states. But we were talking here about different regulators in different countries. And we know there are different levels in terms of how different countries regulate their own ships. So the most important is that regulators are actually up to scratch with what we mean by fatigue risk management system and how to actually implement or support the implementation of a fatigue risk management system in shipping. And the most important thing is it works for our industry. So we can't just get what the aviation are doing and just implement it in the maritime. It's a very different kettle of fish. We've been there for, thousands of years. Aviation has been there for 100 years. So we've got cultural roots there. Very different, very different. So we're trying to actually develop something that works for our industry, which is the maritime. And that's the end of my presentation. I don't know whether there's any questions, but just something else I just want to mention before I just doing some. We do have a conference next year, which is a Maritime Human Factors Conference. It's called ErgoShip 2016. And the conference is not just for academics, but it's also for operators or people who are working in the industry as well. And it's mainly about human factors, how human factors principles or factors can support the operational side. So it's on the 6th and the 7th of April 2016, and we do have a website, which is www.ergoship2016. Did you recognize you? There's skate there, as you can see, 2016.com.au. So please feel free. We've got the website up and running now. So yes, it will be a very interesting conference to attend. So I certainly recommend it.
Michelle, you made an interesting observation. Well, so what you're saying is some of these people that are in fact community service, you see through sleep deprivation, extensively lost goods at sea. I know the Chinese, they are going to suicide.
Yeah.
That's potentially what's happening.
Yeah. So we're potentially going into chronic. So when we talk about chronic shift work, it's chronic. You know, the health effects are huge, because that means we're literally depriving these people from months on end. Yeah, it has, yes. In fact, one of the aspects that the IMO, there's contentious issues, because the thinking is that, they're going to ask us to increase manning. Manning is costly. That's something that operators don't want to touch, you know, that manning aspect. So we've actually tried to put it the other way. We haven't mentioned the word manning on purpose, because manning sends jitters at IMO, and you get all these operators going a bit crazy. So we actually purposefully put in the word adequate resources, and we've linked that to the safety management system, because the safety management system from an IMO perspective is very specific about ensuring that you have adequate resources to operate your ship safely from A to B.
To what extent are operators working, loading or using those like the Yakima or Federal customers?
We don't know. We have absolutely no idea, to be honest. We know that they use caffeine a lot, so caffeine, to drink some caffeine. And as a general population, they are at the top end of the scale, and they use caffeine regularly. So even before they go to sleep. But we have no idea about all the other issues. And we have no idea where even some of these mental health aspects are coming from. No idea.
Another interesting observation on the credit is to perform interaction with diet and sleep.
Yeah.
So if you have a very poor diet, it makes the sleep effect much more
If you want a context and wants to use the maritime, we would certainly be happy to provide the links. So we're keen on getting some research going on, especially from a mental health perspective, and also from a healthy lifestyle perspective from the maritime. So better stop, because Evan is.
No, I'm
I
not.
know you're very hungry.